Hello, this is Florence and welcome to this course on French pronunciation, la prononciation du français, or how to read French. So why did I subtitle this how to read French? Because most of the times when you're going to take some courses online or when you're learning French, at one point you're going to have to write something down, or you're going to be reading from a book and that's also going to be written down. And if you don't know how to read French, it's going to make your life a lot more difficult. So this is why we're here. So how this is going to go is pretty simple. We're going to start with this small introduction, and then we're going to look at some of the most annoying or most common irregularities of the French language. We're going to look at consonant, vowels, groups of consonant, groups of vowels, and so on and so forth. And we're going to do some little exercises for you to read and practice so that we can move forward. So we're going to start with a small reading exercise, and I'm actually going to be the one reading, but while I read, I would like you to follow what I'm reading and see if this is how you would have read this text, okay? So this is an extract of Bonjour Tristesse by Françoise Sagan. Françoise Sagan is a fairly famous French author, which you might want to look up. So let's go. Mon père et Anne se trouvaient déjà sur la terrasse, assis l'un près de l'autre, devant le plateau du petit déjeuner. Je lançai un vague bonjour, m'assis en face d'eux. Par pudeur, je n'osais pas les regarder. Puis, leur silence me força à lever les yeux. Anne avait les traits tirés, seul signe d'une nuit d'amour. Ils souriaient tous les deux, l'air heureux. Cela m'impressionna. Le bonheur m'a toujours semblé une ratification, une réussite. Okay, so... hopefully you did well and you sounded about the same way as I did. Let's have a look at a few things. So for instance, here we say se trouver. So for instance, we don't pronounce these letters. You have some funny thing with accents there. This one changes the pronunciation of the letter. This one doesn't. You have an S here that's not pronounced. You have this funny letter, the C cedilla, that's also here. You have these two vowels that put together sound like E. And then you have these two vowels that put together sounds like E. You have the E at the end of a word that's not pronounced, and so on and so forth. So we're going to learn about all of this, and hopefully by the end of the course, you will not be confused about reading French anymore. All right, welcome back, and let's start right away with a few consonants that we want to learn about. So as you're going to see, some of these are just like in English, but there's always a few differences and different case scenarios that you want to look at. So we're going to start with looking at the different types of C's. So we have the C, which is pronounced like a K in English, like in ski, so it's a hard consonant, like a K, okay, like the word collège. Okay, but if you put an E or an I or a Y, the Y in French is kind of considered like a double I or something. So it works as a vowel, and it works kind of follows a lot of the rules that that applies to the I. So if you write CE, CI, or CY, the sound changes to a soft consonant. So it's going to be like in the English word set. Okay, like for instance the word ceci. All right, so we go from K to S. All right. Now, in the same way, another way to soften the consonant where we somehow need it, it's usually for usage reasons or for good pronunciation reasons, or in an abbreviation. When the C is followed by the other vowels that are not the E, the I, or the Y, so or A or a U, you can make it soft, so make it sound like the English S in set, by adding a cedilla at the bottom. So you create the letter C cedilla or CCD, which we have right here. And then you get words like ça va. Okay, if there was no cedilla, it would be cava. All right. Now we have the G. The G works kind of like the C's. So you have the same idea where you have a hard consonant and you have a soft consonant before an E, an I, or a Y. Okay, so the hard consonant is a G, like in get, like the word garçon, and then the soft consonant is a J. Okay, like in English, measure, for instance. Okay, here we have garage. Okay, the H is silent most of the time. There's only very few words that where you would need to pronounce the H, and it would certainly not be heard quite the same way as you would say it in English. So whenever you see a word that starts with an H, you can pretend it's not there. So for instance, un homme, you just don't hear the H at all, okay? The letter J works like the G that we had above when it's before an E, an I, or a Y, like in measure. Okay, so these two sounds are exactly the same. Okay, jaune, for instance. The R, the French R, okay, like in the word rose, for instance. So if you speak Spanish, it's kind of a little bit like la jota, but it's not as dry, as harsh, okay? It's kind of like a softer, more liquid sound that kind of goes a little bit through the back of your throat, but not quite as much. It's a little bit like when you clear your throat, but not too much. So I mean, that's something you're going to have to practice on. Yes, some of you might reach the correct sound. Others will always sound a little bit foreign, but that's okay. I sound foreign too, and I can live okay. So rose would be the sound of the r. Okay, and note that at the end of a word, when you have er, you don't actually pronounce the r, and you just pronounce e. Okay. Now the s at the beginning of a word, it's like the word set in English, kind of like the C earlier that we had when it's before an E, an I, or Y. Okay, like for instance, the word science. When it's inside a word between two vowels, okay? And I insist that that sound is only going to work when it's between two vowels. The S becomes a Z sound, okay, like a Z, like in the word zoo, for instance. So for instance, you take the word cuisine, okay, which means kitchen or cuisine. And then the S at the end of the word is most of the time silent, okay? You just don't say it. A lot of the time you're gonna have an S at the end of the word just to mark the plural. And that's only something that will appear in writing, but you don't normally pronounce it. And there are a few words, like the word plus, for instance, plus. Sometimes people will say plus, but other people sometimes say plus as well. So as a rule, the S at the end of a letter is simply silent. You just pretend it's not there, like the H at the beginning of a letter. So anglais, for instance, français would be another one. Okay. Now let's look at the X. Now X is gonna work like the X in English exist. Okay. So kind of like a Z sound in there, like z. Okay, so for instance, the word xylophone, okay? Then when it's inside a word, usually it's a drier sound, like in the word fax, for instance, so auxiliaire. You will hear variety in those words. Some people will say auxiliaire. These two, there's a little bit of leeway in there. And at the end of a word, it's normally silent. Again, you're gonna have the same case as with the S, where if it's plural, you don't hear it. And with a lot of words, you just simply don't hear it. And there's a few words where the X at the end of the word is pronounced like an S, okay? So here we have the word heureux, okay? You don't hear the X. And then you have the word six, okay? Or the word 10, which also means 10, which is another number, and you pronounce it like an S, okay? So I'm gonna let you pause on this if you want to kind of study this and maybe take a few notes and practice and try to remember as much as you can. And when you're ready, we're gonna move on to the next slide and look at some examples. So here, I would like you to spend some time to do a little bit of practice, and this is how it's going to work during this course. You usually have a blue slide that's going to explain, and then a pink one that is going to put these things into practice. So you have here a list of different words that represent the different types of consonants that we've just looked at. So what I would like you to do now is just pause on this, read these words out loud, okay? And maybe you can record yourself even if you want to, so you can compare. Do it a few times. If you're not sure, maybe make a note of one particular word so you can listen out for it a little bit more. And then when you're ready, play again, and you will hear the correct pronunciation for each of those. Okay? So go ahead. Good luck. Okay, so how did it go? Did you do well? Are you stuck on some words? Do you think you're okay with all these rules? So let's have a look what you should have sounded like. So we're going to start at the first line here, and I'm going to read all of these slowly so you can follow, okay? So we start with celt, façon, cirque, quart, couture, leçon, acteur, copain, calciné, rinçage. Gérant, gigantesque, garantie, étage, agile, grand, garde, gauche, abrogé, abrogation. Huile, déshérité, habillé, humilié, herbe, histoire, gothique, rhume. Jeune, acajou, adjectif, Djibouti, éjecté, jamais, juré. Rue, rouge, arriver, partir, rassembler, ordonner, rapide. Français, française, solide, salut, stupide, Asie, scolaire, aise, rasoir, voisin. Exilé, peureux, taxe, xénophobie, yeux, fixé, réflexe, chou, 10. Okay, let's carry on with our consonants, and let's have a look at what happens when we put some letters together, okay? So we're going to start with CH put together is not a ch like in English, but a sh like in the word ship, like in chocolat, for instance. The GN is like the English NI in onion, nia. And if you speak Spanish, it's like the ñe, okay, the N with the little tilde on top. So like, for instance, the word champagne. The PH together is like the letter F. So we're going to have words like pharmacy, for instance. A double L, when it's after the letter I, is pronounced like the English Y in yes. Okay, so it's a y sound. And again, if you speak Spanish, that's the kind of the same sound that you have with the double L. Like in the word fille, for instance. Q and U put together, we do not pronounce the U. It's there for pronunciation reason. So it's like the English K in ski. So we say question, for instance. And also a reminder, the S, the T, the X, and the Z are usually silent at the end of the word. So we'll have parents, okay, that's a plural, vers, de, année. All right? So let's have a look at some examples. So take a minute to read all of these, apply the rules that we just looked at, pause the video while you do that, and when you're ready, well done, and start the video again to listen to the correct pronunciation. Chaussette, chat, archiduchesse, machine, acheter, chuchoter, architecte. Accompagner, araignée, montagne, tignasse. Philosophie, phosphore, aphasie, photographe, phobie, téléphoner, phare. Abeille, vieille, vaciller, fouille, aiguille, tirailler, mouiller, volaille. Quart, quinquennat, unique, à queue, pratique, équivoque, vaquer. Rit, art, doux, douloureux, anglais, part, bijoux, journaux, arrêt, vent, additionnons. All right, well done. So far you've mastered all the consonant sounds, pretty much. So now what we're going to do is look at all the vowels. So in this lesson, we're actually going to combine the single vowels and the group of vowels that create a new sound when you put them together. There's a lot of that in French, unfortunately, some very weird sounds. And we'll read a few less examples at the end, because now that you've read already a few with the previous words from the consonants, obviously you've already seen vowels, so you're probably already starting to get an idea of what vowels are like. Okay, so let me start with saying, in terms of the vowels, there's a lot of variety in terms of the spelling. Some of the vowels will have accents on them, like for instance the A with the accent and the A with the circumflex here. And then all the E's have different accents too, and then you're going to find them on the I too. In reality, apart from the E, where the sound really changes when you have an E accent aigu or accent grave or accent circonflexe, the other letters, in theory, yes, there may be a slight difference in sound, but many French speakers probably won't know the difference. So I'm just going to be a little bit more general with the vowels where the accent doesn't really change the sound. Okay, so we're going to start with the letter A. So in the alphabet, our first letter is A, not A, it's A, and it pretty much is pronounced like that. Okay, so you're gonna always hear it. So it's kind of like cat or father. It's kind of a mix in between, depending where you're from. So these words would sound like chat, voilà, âge. Some people would say maybe a closer sound like âge a little bit, but you know, âge is fine. Now the letter E in English, which is E in French. So when we say the alphabet, we say A, B, C, D, E. Okay. It is a little bit like the way you pronounce the letter O in the word action. Okay, action, it's a little bit like that. And that's when you have the E without an accent. So you're gonna have words like devoir, peser. Okay, you hear this sound. Now, the accents on the E are very important, and they really become different sounds altogether once an E has an accent. Okay, so the E accent aigu is E, the E accent grave is E, and the E accent circonflexe is pretty much the same as the previous one, E as well. Okay, it's a little bit of a longer, more open mouth kind of sound. Now, these are the ones that you really have to remember, because for instance, we learned earlier that an E at the end of a letter is silent. An E accent at the end of a letter is not. So that's very important to remember, that you kind of want to consider all the E with an accent like a separate letter almost. Okay, it's as if you just add those 3 letters to the French alphabet to remember that they are something different. Okay, so we have devoir and peser. Then we have télévision, which is a very good example of an E accent aigu, télévision. And then we have frère, okay, which sounds like j'ai, which we'll look at in the next slide in a minute. Okay, so you hear the difference between télévision and frère. Okay, these are 2 different sounds, et, and then we have tête. Okay, now the letter I, so this is I in English and E in French, so we say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Okay, now it kind of works like the A earlier. There are different versions of the spelling, but they are slightly shorter or slightly longer, but really they sound close enough that you don't need to worry too much about it, in my opinion. Okay, so we would say midi, une île. Okay, the E becomes a little bit longer just because it's followed by the L. It's kind of happened like that. Now, the one that you have to remember is when you see any letter with the 2 little dots on top, which we call tréma. Okay, what that means is that that letter is actually pronounced, and it will usually happen in a word where it's preceded by another vowel, which normally put together with that vowel would sound different. So we're going to look at earlier that AI put together is pronounced like E, but in this case, we're going to say maïs. So the double dots on top, the tréma, tells you that you actually have to pronounce it as if it was a single letter, okay? And we'll look at more examples. Now, for the O, it's a little bit of the same as the A and the I. There's not really a big difference between the pronunciation, whether there's an accent or not. So it's O. It's a little bit more closed, in my opinion, that in the English part. Go, it's kind of an in-between sound, let's say. Okay, so we have botte, stylo, hôpital. Okay. And just for future reference, when you write, one good way to remember when to put a circumflex, and you have the two examples here, a lot of the time the English word will have an S in it, so island or isle. In English there's an S, and we kind of replace that S by a circumflex. It's the same with hospital. We have an O. A lot of the time those words will have an S in English. Now we're going to look at the sound U. Now this sound doesn't actually exist in English, so it's one that's sometimes a little bit more challenging. So it's kind of a cross between the U and the E. So you kind of like put your lips together, close your mouth, round it up a little bit, and it comes out as a U. Okay, so that's something you're gonna have to practice, I guess. So a good example is turlututu, turlututu, and that's our U sound, which is a French sound. It exists in other languages, but it doesn't exist in English, unfortunately. Now, the letter Y, which we call Y, is like the English E. It's a fairly long E, or shorter. I mean, it works. It sounds basically like the letter I, the E. Okay, like for instance, would say pays. Okay. Now let's look at some combinations of vowels. So that's interesting because it's not necessarily obvious. So you're gonna have to learn them and remember them. Okay. So AI put together is gonna be pronounced like the E. Okay, so either the E circumflex or the E grave, okay, E. It's usually a more open E sound, like you lait, okay? The AU or EAU is pronounced like a O. It's simply exactly like a letter O, okay? So any word that you're gonna see AU or EAU, you're gonna pretend that it's a O. So chaud, O, okay? EI put together is like the E grave or E circumflex. Again, it's kind of like the same sound as the AI. So E. So we have neige, okay? Then we have the EU put together. It's pronounced like the French letter E. So we say E. And we will hear it when it's at the end of the word. So it's kind of a way for us when we want to hear that E sound at the end of a word, we don't put just an E because the E normally is not pronounced. So we just add a U and that we just pretend that it's pronounced the same way. So for instance, feu. Then we have OI. OI put together is pronounced wa. Okay, like in the English word one. Okay, but without the N at the end. So one. Okay, wa. As if you were spelling W-A kind of thing. Okay, so that's doigt. Then we have OU or OU with an accent. The accent here doesn't make any difference. That's pronounced like OO, like the double O in English, like a loop, for instance. So that's OO, okay? And you don't want to get it mixed up with the sound U that we saw before, okay? So we do have a OO. So we have bouche or OO, which is where. And then we have this funny letter. So it kind of works like the letter E. So this is actually called E dans l'eau, which literally means the E in the O. It's a weird letter. I'm not quite sure where it comes from, but it's usually used in connection with the letter U, and it's pronounced exactly like the previous one that we had here, the EU. E, okay, so sœur, for instance. It's a little bit more open like feu, for instance. And it's usually because it's followed by another letter, okay? That's more the reason, really. So they're very similar sounds. Okay, so we have e, o, e, wa, u, e. Okay. So now let's have a look at a few examples here. So as usual, you've got the hang of it now. Let's take a second to read these and then pause the video so that you can do that and then listen to the correct pronunciation, okay? So we have soir, achète, abreuvoir, souris, Guy, étonné, cœur, rompu, perdu, coup, mais, aïeul, fête, embarras, automobile, beau, bé, bu, chômage, laïcité, Yves, honnête, dégâts, naïf, beige, gros, merveille, envoyé. All right, and we are back with the last lesson of this course on pronunciation. And what we're going to do now is look at combinations of vowel and consonant, okay? So we're going to start with the combination of ER or ET or EZ, all right? So in this combination, you do not pronounce the consonant at all. And you're going to pretend that you have an E with an accent aigu, okay? So the sound E, all right? So for instance, you're going to have any ER verb, which is going to be the topic of one of the other courses. Nager, et, which means and, écouter, all right? All of these, you can hear that you just sound, it's like a vowel sound, you do not pronounce these at all, okay? The only way where you could pronounce the R and the Z in these examples is when you do a liaison, which is when we link two words together. And that's something that, you know, will come up later on in other topics when you do some reading. A, however, the word A-E-T and never links to another word. So it would never happen in the case of A in this case. So that was E-R-A-T and E-Z. Now, when you have the letters G-E put together before an A or an O or a U, that's when we have a sort of soft consonant situation. The reason why normally we do that, the reason why we add that E is because for some grammatical reason or for some correct sounding reason, we want to hear a J sound instead of a G sound, all right? So here the GE is going to be like the English S in measure, so it's a J sound, like langage, okay? Now, when you have GU before an E, an I, or a Y, it's the opposite. So normally the G before an E, an I, or a Y on its own is pronounced like the previous sound that we just looked at, le J, okay? If you had a U, you do not pronounce that U. So you're going to pretend it's not there, but what that means is that it hardens your consonant into a G, okay? Like in English, get, so langage, all right? So then the last ones, the nasal vowels, the famous French nasal vowels, all right? Now the nasal vowels all will involve an N, okay? They're always a combination of either one vowel and an N or sometimes two vowels and an N, as we're gonna see, all right? So the three nasal sounds that you're gonna have in French are en, un, and on. Okay, so en, un, on. Now, what happens if you hear these sounds when I say en? You can kind of see that I would open my mouth and it kind of like sound like an A sound in French, which is a, but coming through the nose, okay? And here you have un, and it's more like a I sound or a U sound, but again, coming through the nose. And this one is a more rounded sound, okay, where you really round your mouth, but then it comes through the nose, okay? So all of these nasal sounds, there's a possibility that you're not going to get them right away. A lot of the time, foreigners tend to pronounce the actual N or the nasal, the N that makes it nasal, actually like a proper N. But you kind of want to do that, but stop just before you say it, if you like. So it's like if you were pronouncing the sound in slow motion, and you wanted to say but you stop before the M or the N, if you stop before that, you could imagine that nasal sound will come. At the end of the day, you're gonna have to just listen to it, listen to some real French speakers, listen to song, watch TV, stream anything that you have that's in French, and then you're gonna hear the sounds, okay? So we're gonna start with the sound en, okay? Which we have here. So it can be sometimes an M, mostly it's an N, but the M also happens. So we have en. So you can see that en sound, okay, can be made either with a combination of A, M or N, or an E, M or N. The T also sometimes will happen, and you don't pronounce it because it's a consonant. It's a consonant or at the end of a word or at the end of a group of words, and you don't normally pronounce it. Okay, so let's have some examples here. Trampoline, en, maintenant, tant, vraiment. Okay. Now we have the sound un now. So this will work with an I or a U, and again your N mostly, and sometimes the M as well. So it's a little bit like the A in ban, but through the nose, and you kind of stop. You don't actually say the N, okay? It's kind of difficult to explain how you can pronounce it. It's really a matter of how much you're going to hear it and practicing, okay? Just try to record yourself a few times and see if you sound the right way, okay? So examples here, we have impatient, matin, demain, plein, un. Okay. Now we have the on sound, okay, which is either OM, ON, or ONT. And that's the same method as for the other two, as I explained before, but your mouth is much more round, and this one is the one that's closest to the on. And that's usually out of all the nasals, that's the one that most foreigners can do the best. It's a little bit easier. Okay, so for instance, bon, son, okay? So these are all nasal sounds. So again, just to recap on the nasal, it's en, un, and on, okay? En, un, on. Always try to speak as if you had a cold or something, all right? So, and again, so this is our last little practice. So I'm gonna invite you again to pause the video here and read all these expressions. Remember, they're words, so obviously they're gonna also have all the other rules that you've learned before. And that's pretty much all I wanted to do on the pronunciation. So I hope that's helpful to you. So I'm gonna let you practice, and I'll be back in a few seconds so that you can listen to the correct pronunciation. Rez-de-chaussée, cornet, manger, ricochet, voler, traverser. Engagea, transiger, digue, guerre, Geoffroy, mangeons, bague. Ambiant, dans, ment, temps, arrogant, intelligent, souvent, embarquant. D'un, bain, rein, incident, incertain, brun, train, lin, important, pourpoint, sain. Son, bombe, tombe, long, sonde, montagne, ronde, entrepont. All right, so here we are. Again, I hope you found this helpful, and thank you very much for taking part in this course. See you again. Bye-bye. All right, welcome back and well done. You've now pretty much completed the full course. And just to finish, to have a little bit of fun, we're going to do a leçon fun on tongue twisters, okay? So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at each of those, what we call virlangues in French, or tongue twisters in English. We're going to look at what part of the pronunciation course we're actually working on. And I'm going to give you a quick translation of each of them. Remember, the tongue twisters are all about pronunciation or enunciation. A lot of these are used by actors to actually use to enunciate properly and to make sure that they are understood when they're on stage. So the meaning really is not what this is about, but it's much more on putting into practice what you've learned. And for actual French people, it's just like a fun way to practice their own language. Okay, so we're going to look at the first one, which is tu t'entêtes à tout tenter, tu t'uses et tu te tues à tant t'entêter. So it's saying you insist in trying everything, you tire yourself out, and you kill yourself being so stubborn, basically. I'm giving you, very vague translations. That's kind of the vague meaning of this particular tongue twister. So what are we working on here? We have the E circumflex that we looked at. We have things like the ER at the end of the word that's not pronounced, the ES that's not pronounced, and that's because it's a grammar. We have a nasal, we have more nasal here, and we have our little U sound, which is a new sound. So I'm going to say this again. It's tu t'entêtes à tout tenter, tu t'uses et tu te tues à tant t'entêter. Okay, and if you want to try to say it a little bit faster, it goes tu t'entêtes à tout tenter, tu t'uses et tu te tues à tant t'entêter. Right, so that's when you've done it a few times. All right, so number two. Number two is, first it means, have you been to Tahiti? Okay, so one of the main things we're looking at here is our H, which is completely silent. We have the tu again, we have our E accents to practice. It's a simple sentence. As-tu été à Tahiti? What I will insist on is that you will have a tendency to want to pronounce this H. You really want to pretend it's not there, so it's Tahiti. Okay, so it becomes as-tu été à Tahiti. A little bit faster, as-tu été à Tahiti. Okay. Okay, the next one. So obviously, it's a lot of work on the U sound, as you can see right away, and it's asking, have you seen the tutu or Lily's tutu from Honolulu? Tulle is a type of material, which frankly, I'm going to tell you, I don't actually know what it is in English, but it's what tutus are made of for ballet. So the sentence is, as-tu vu le tutu de tulle de Lily d'Honolulu? As-tu vu le tutu de tulle de Lily d'Honolulu? Okay, so here, remember, we want to work on the U, okay, which is a kind of, you put your mouth as if you were going to do a E in English, but you kind of like round it up a little bit and you come out with the sound U, all right? It's not the same as OU, okay, which is the OU put together, if you remember. So this is our U sound, which is not unique to French, but one of the sounds that definitely doesn't exist exactly in English. So, as-tu vu le tutu de tulle de Lily d'Honolulu? Oh, and we also have, of course, the H that we don't pronounce for Honolulu. The next one, we have here a few of the nasals put together. That's the main, it's obviously working on the vowels here, but also the nasals. So what it means is, auntie, your tarte tatin, which you probably know what that is. It's a special type of pie that's made in France, that's kind of made upside down. So your pie was tempting to uncle. Uncle tried your pie, auntie. Okay, again, remember this really is not about the meaning. So this is how it goes. Tata, ta tarte, tatin, tanta, tonton. Tonton, tata, tatarte, tatin, tata. Okay, so tata, ta tarte, tatin, tanta, tonton. Tonton, tata, tatarte, tatin, tata. Okay, tata, tata, tatin, tanta, tonton, tonton, tata, tatarte, tatin, tata. It's a little bit hard to say. All right. Obviously, you don't have to say it very fast. Really, what you want to do here is try to pronounce it right. This one, we are going to have a mix of practice on the U sound. There's a little bit of nasal. Here, there's 3 of the same ones that are spelled differently. We learned that. And also a little bit of practice on the R sound, the R, okay, which again is not the same as in English. So this is how it goes. Le murmurant Paris rend Paris murmurant. So the wall that's around Paris makes Paris muffled, if you like. It's something like that. So again, le murmurant Paris rend Paris murmurant. Le murmurant Paris rend Paris murmurant. Okay, obviously there's a play on word, or the le murmurant. Murmure, which happens to sound the same, but really has nothing to do with walls. Okay, this one is a bit strange. Now we're working on the sound OI, which I really like to do because it is pronounced very uniquely wa, if you remember, and obviously it's not extremely logical when you think about it. We also have our combination of the AI, which is pronounced e. Okay. We have an accent, the accent grave, okay? And then we have the AU, which is a O sound, and then we have the EU, which is a sound. So we have a lot of our vowel combinations here, which I like very much. And we also have an R again, which we're gonna have to pronounce properly with the vr, okay? So this talks about pepper that makes the octopus hot, basically, the poor octopus. Okay, fièvre meaning fever, okay, it gives it a fever kind of thing. So the sentence goes: le poivre fait fièvre à la pauvre pieuvre. Okay, le poivre fait fièvre à la pauvre pieuvre. Okay, le poivre fait fièvre à la pauvre pieuvre. All right, so we want to hear, remember at the end of a word, the E is silent, but you always want to hear the sounds that are just before. So here, if I was really pronouncing more slowly, I would say le poivre fait fièvre à la pauvre pieuvre. In more normal French, we would say le poivre fait fièvre à la pauvre pieuvre. Okay, so you hear the vr, but you don't hear the e at the end, if you like. So that was that. Now, number 7, 5 chiens chassent 6 chats. So this is the playing between the sh sound and the s sound, which sometimes gets a little bit mixed up. So it's more one of those things that you try to get kids to say to see if they're going to get it right or not. It's talking about 5 dogs that are chasing 6 cats. We have some nasals, obviously, here. And we have one of those things that doesn't get pronounced, the ENT here that we don't pronounce. Okay, so 5 chiens chassent 6 chats. 5 chiens chassent 6 chats. Okay, and remember that's, you know, that might be something that you've done if you learned French. Otherwise, there's actually a course on the present also that you can look at. That's a present tense verb ending, and it just doesn't get pronounced. So 5 chiens chassent 6 chats. Okay. Now, on the next one, number 8, we also obviously have here practice on the nasal on. Okay. And it's really just that one in this case. And then we have again our little U sound, and we have an R there, which is always good to practice. But the big focus on that is the on. Okay, so it says, if my uncle shaves your uncle will be shaven, which is quite logical. Si mon tonton ton tonton sera tondu. Si mon tonton ton tonton ton sera tondu. Okay. I want to point out also here the ton, which is a verb conjugation, has a D at the end, which you don't pronounce. Okay. Here we are really practicing on words that sound the same, even though they're spelled differently. So we have here the word ver and the word ver and the word ver and the word ver and again the ver. Okay, so what's happening here is that all of these words are gonna be pronounced exactly the same. Okay, and he's saying, have you seen the green worm going towards the glass that's green? Okay. And we're saying le verre en verre because normally anything that you drink out of to drink water or juice or whatever is called un verre, even if it's made of plastic in French. So we would say un verre en plastique to describe a cup, because that's kind of the way we think about it. So un verre en verre is actually specifying that the glass that you're drinking out of is actually made of glass, which in English is not usually a problem. So here's how we say this one. As-tu vu le verre vert allant vers le verre en verre vert? As-tu vu le verre vert allant vers le verre en verre vert? As-tu vu le verre vert allant vers le verre en verre vert? Okay, so again, we hear a lot of ver sounds, and there's only one that's spelled ver, all the others have different spellings, even though they spelled the same way. Okay. The next one, number 10, is actually, this one is a kind of famous one that's being used by actors. So there's even various different versions of it. The translation of it is a little bit gross, frankly. It means 5 fat rats are grilling in the big fat grease. Not quite sure, don't ask, but it's very good to pronounce your correct R's, okay? And that's really what the focus of this is. So it goes 5 gros rats grillent dans la grosse graisse grasse, okay? 5 gros rats grillent dans la grosse graisse grasse. 5 gros rats grillent dans la grosse graisse grasse, okay? The last one, I had to put that in. I just wanted to just do one extra one. This is a real classic. Years and years ago, there was even a song made out of this tongue twister. It's talking about the Archduchess, socks. Are they dry? Extremely dry. Okay, so again, it really doesn't mean anything, but you're practicing your CHs and your S's so that you don't get them mixed up here. And this goes, les chaussettes de l'archiduchesse sont-elles sèches, archi-sèches? Les chaussettes de l'archiduchesse sont-elles sèches, archi-sèches? Okay, this is hard to say. So here it is. These are the tongue twisters. You can go back and forth to see which one you want to practice more on. If you're not sure about the pronunciation, you can go back to look at which category they belong to. And this is it. I hope you enjoy this course and I hope you feel better with your pronunciation now. Bye-bye.